Get stacked.
Triple threat.
Expected value. Now take what you learn, go out there, and get stacked.
What up, Gripsters and random YouTubers? Evan here for Grips.com. Here reviewing one of my own tournaments from last month for a little change of pace. In this particular tournament, I won the Sunday Major on Microgaming for 8,600 euros. Now, you'll notice the replayer is a little different than usual. That is because I'm working on getting a new replayer so that we can review tournaments on sites other than PokerStars. And also, I wanted to beef up the quality of analysis by adding in a heads-up display. So here it is. We're going to keep it pretty simple. We're just going to use 8 statistics. The top left is VPIP, which means what percentage of hands a player plays. The next one is pre-flop raise, what percentage of hands they raise with. The pink stat is 3-bet. The purple stat is full to 3-bet. On the bottom row, we have attempt to steal, continuation bet, full to continuation bet, and 4-bet. Now, if you aren't used to a heads-up display, if you aren't familiar with them, trust me, by the end of this video series, you'll have a pretty good understanding of how they work and how you can get a lot out of them. They have a lot of power, so I really wanted to introduce them to you so you can start using them, incorporating them into your game. Anyway, speaking about the tournament, you probably have not heard of Microgaming. That's fair. It's a smaller network that really caters to, well, micro stakes grinders. The network is a group of sports betting sites which share this poker platform. And as you probably know, sports betting fishies aren't exactly the best poker players. So action is quite soft, structures are very good, and the fields are small. So it's possible to get a pretty solid return on investment. You don't get those crazy jackpot payoffs that you get on the PokerStars tournaments, but you're going to make the final table and the final few tables much more frequently and get to apply your edge. So this particular tournament had 183 entrants and it was a 200 euro buy-in. And that's going to do it for my long-winded intro. Let's get into the action. So I'm going to be new at this thing. That's how we click through, and that's how we click to the next hand. Cool. I can work with that. And we probably don't want to show our opponent's cards now, do we? No, we most certainly do not. So we pop it up with the ace-4 of hearts on the button and get a pretty dry flop. Great board for us to be continuation betting on. Small blind peels. Now, depending on how wide he's peeling from the small blind, this could be a good card for two-barreling. If he's peeling pretty wide and floating the flop pretty wide, then we can expect to move him off a decent amount of hands on this turn. I made the incorrect assumption that he was calling with a pretty narrow range from the small blind and therefore wasn't going to be folding to a second barrel. So I opted to just give up on this pot, take my ace high for showdown. Didn't really expect to win, but I didn't expect him to fold to future barrels. Clearly, I was wrong. It's 10-7 suited. I opt to not open despite being in late position. At this stage in the day, I do have quite a few tables going. This is kind of the peak time of a Sunday. So I'm pretty selective about the hands I open in the early levels, especially before the antes. Now that's not to say that you can't open a 10-7 suited from the cutoff. In fact, it's perfectly fine. But I just opt to play a pretty tight, borderline nitty strategy in the early goings and just try to get my cooler spots. So here with the ace-9 suited, we're definitely not just going to fold to a button open. We opt to take the same line as Gustavo did and just peel from the small blind. And go ahead and do what he did as well and peel on a pretty dry flop with just some backdoor draws. Now, once this turn card comes, I don't really expect to have the best hand, but on this particular river, I think I just might, so I go for a small value bet and don't get called by anyone. Jack-7 off, definitely not playing that. Same with the Queen-6 off. We just don't care about playing these raggedy hands. But big up hands like Ace-King, yeah. Put me in the game, coach. Ace-8 off early position, no thank you. Pocket sixes, do I opt to play it? I do. And in the early stages when you're super deep stacked, there's definitely nothing wrong to opening up the pot and getting in the action with hands like small pairs. Some players may not expect you to have those sorts of hands when you raise from early position, and if you spike a set, obviously you have very high implied odds with the fact that you have so much money behind. It's important though to not get in a habit of raising every pair in every position every time you get dealt one when the action's folded to you. It's important. So like if you're always raising them when you get them in first position, as the blinds go up and your stacks get shallower, that's going to become more and more of a mistake, and it's important to just, you know, not be doing that. 5-4-0, we gonna play? Probably not. What about that Queen 9-0? Also, no tanks. Pocket kings though. Oh hell yeah. So we've got a limp and a raise. Poker 7-7x is a weak player. We see that he's running a VPIP of 33%. He's playing 33% of hands and he's only raising 6 of them. So he's playing a very weak passive game. We could flat to invite him in the pot, but the fact that Donna as a reg is isolating the fish, Donald Duck, if we 3-bet here on the button, he may think that we're, you know, FOS and try to play back at us. So I 3-bet to a sizing that I thought might look a little bit BS-y, and Donald Duck is out of there. Now, for the win, pay up has what I think is a pretty narrow range here for cold calling a 3-bet, like 8s plus and maybe some strong suited Broadway hands. So I go for the C-bet, take it down. If he were to check raise me there, I would be in a pretty uncomfortable spot, which is why checking back on this flop is an option you can take. Do expect to get barreled at though if you take that line. All right, next up we got the AKDD, and we are going to see a few. I'm not sure if I 4-bet or flatted here. This guy's 3-bet is pretty high at 11%, so I could see myself definitely 4-betting here and expecting that to be a pretty common result. If it were heads up and there weren't another player who could overcall when I flatted, I may flat to go to the flop with a pretty strong but also a pretty disguised range and keep in a lot of hands that he may 3-bet with, Ace-X suited, King-X suited, that I do have dominated. But I decided I didn't really want to play this hand 3-way. So, and I thought if I flatted for the win pay up, it's probably going to be flatting pretty often as well. And we'll be folding these raggedy things. Now, this structure is pretty slow. You get a lot of chips, and there are a lot of blind levels in this one. So it's a tournament where you can afford to be pretty patient. You have a lot of play, you have a lot of time, and you will have a lot of opportunities to pick up hands. So I play it pretty slow, pretty tight to the vest in the early going, and I think that's a perfectly fine strategy. The one thing about this Sunday major where it differs, 9-8 suited under the gun? Yeah. Jack-10 suited definitely opening, 10-9 suited probably right on the fringe, and 9-8 suited I opted to fold. And it's because of what I'm about to mention that unlike tournaments like the Sunday Million, where you have tons and tons and tons of satellite players in the field and some really weak players in the mix, in this tournament, there are a few satellite players who qualify, but in a field of 180 players for a 200 euro buy-in, you're going to expect that overall the field is going to be pretty strong. And because I feel that the field is pretty strong, I don't want to get too carried away with opening weak hands or marginal hands in early position and middle position when I'm dealing with a table full of good players. I prefer to just play solid ranges where I know that every open I'm making is a plus EV open, rather than ones that could be on the fringe, and it really depends on table dynamics. Anyway, we got the AK, we got the TPTK, and we're going to go for that value. I'm thinking all the streets. Gustavo does not cooperate, but that's okay. Just because we flopped a big hand does not mean we're necessarily just going to get a ton of action. A6 suited? Nope. No thanks. Although against some players, you can definitely, expand your range to calling with those suited aces. And hands like ace-10 off, you got to know that in this position, I think that this hand is a fold. Couple seats over, it's an open, and if there's antes in play, it's an open. But this deep stacked, 100 big blinds and ace-10 off, even in middle-ish position, I'm just not that interested in getting involved in the action. Remember, it's really important to be selective with which hands you get involved with pre-flop, because your pre-flop decisions compound post-flop. When you open up that pre-flop game tree, you are, creating a game tree that goes on post-flop. And if you're starting yourself off at a disadvantage, you're going to have to play extremely well post-flop to make that up. And in reasonably tough fields, I think that's just pretty tough to do. Here with the king-8 off, I am getting pretty good pot odds, and I have a above average hand. I think I'm probably going to fold it, but this is definitely a spot where it can be appeal. As I said, at this stage in the day, I have a lot of tables going and a lot of tournaments going, so I'm looking to just take spots that I think are really heavily in my favor. Those spots where, it's slightly positive expectation to play the hand, but it's going to involve a lot of thinking and a lot of decision making on my part. I'm going to opt to pass on a lot of times in the interest of making my multi-tabling easier. I want to be able to focus my brain power on the most important decisions on whichever tournaments I have going, and not waste it on decisions that, while they net me a small profit, it's not going to be as much as potential other profit. So here we go with the 3-bet. Donald Duck is opening a good amount on the button. We see as a steal of 43%, and we just take that one down. Could also flat with a hand like ace-3 suited. I think when in these really deep stack situations, I prefer flatting with the stronger suited aces, the hands that dominate his opening range. And with the hands that expect to be ahead of his opening range but don't necessarily dominate a ton of it, I prefer to play them for my semi-bluffs. And we just take that one down and get back to folding our rags. And even queen-10 off, I'm just not opening the hijack. Cutoff, definitely going to open. Hijack, I'm passing. Maybe I'm giving up a tiny bit of EV in that one. I'll have to consult with the charts to see. But you guys are going to see that, how much EV is there really in opening the pot with that hand if the players behind you are tough and are going to give you a challenge. You don't need to be opening these good-looking hands from earliest position and even middle-ish position when you think there's a good chance you're going to run into a strong hand and be left playing out of position with the worst hand. When antes come into play, it's a totally different story, but when you are playing deep stacked, full ring poker, generally speaking, tight is right. Not even getting in there with the 6-9. These hands look fun, I could see some flops. I might be able to pick up a piece, but how often am I really catching a piece? I don't know. Probably not often enough to warrant it. Like, yo, grips, man. We get it. We're gonna make some folds. Can we get to some action? All right, I'll click it through and get us to some hands that we probably are going to be playing. And at this point, the antes are now in the mix, so we're going to be opening a little bit more, a little bit wider. And on this board, I'm just going to fire out my c-bet, hope that my opponent did not hit, and take it down. And another thing to note is that once the antes come into play, good players are going to adjust by playing more hands as well. They're going to be defending their blinds with more hands than they were pre-ante. So I'm not saying I'm not going to c-bet this board. On this ace-high board where I'm the pre-flop raiser, I'm probably going to be c-betting a good amount. But if we were dealing with a really tight player, his defending range might connect with this flop pretty well. Pre-ante, someone's going to have a much narrower range than they are going to post-ante. So you should be a little more selective about which boards you c-bet, or more particular with your sizing of c-betting when people are having that narrower range. And once the antes come in, when you're dealing with good players who are going to adjust by expanding their defending range, you can now c-bet wider, c-bet at a higher frequency, because they're just going to have more hands that didn't connect with the strong piece. Likewise, if they're going to be peeling the flops fairly wide, because, you know, they got to continue whenever they flop some decent equity, you're going to want to adjust to that by firing more second and maybe even third barrels. Anyway, we got that ace king, and we really didn't get that flop we were looking for. I think three-way, with the board being low and with there being some draws out there, I don't even know if I really like firing a c-bet here. So I check. Our passive player bets the pot, which usually means he's got something decent. Gets jammed on, and we see that that was quite the cooler flop. But kudos to me for not wasting the c-bet. We see, oh, there's 3 low cards. Like, if they got Broadway cards, they aren't going to have connected with it. Yeah, well, there are still 2 opponents, and these days people are capable of flatting with big pairs. So be very selective about those boards you see bet. You know, be very particular. Be very meticulous and calculated in everything you do at the tables. Are we deep enough? I think here we're deep enough. I hope I peel here. Good shit. We see the flop. And we don't see a 6 and 7 million ways to the flop. We're going to let that one go. I'm just curious. Queens. Very. These passive fish guys are very strange. So just taking a quick break to look at the table. We do have 2 players who look pretty weak. The guy on my left is playing 32% of hands, and the guy to his left is playing 38% of hands. The only problem lies in the fact that, well, they're both to my left, so it's going to be hard to get chips out of them. Unless, of course, I can flop a set. And here, the board looks pretty good for pocket fives, but if we think about the pre-flop raiser's range, he's still going to have some hands that have his dead, and the ones that don't have his dead are still going to have some equity in the form of a couple overcards, and he's going to keep firing those barrels. It's going to be tough for us to just call down with that pair of fives with the player behind. I just don't see the need to put in more chips there. You don't need to egoically protect your pre-flop investment. If you think you have a profitable post-flop call, a profitable post-flop peel, by all means do it. But don't just, you know, peel because you're like, well, I saw this flop and it's decent for me, so I got to protect the fact that I got involved in this pot. No. Are you being offered the right odds versus your opponent's range and the equity that the various parts of his range has? That's how you determine whether or not you should be continuing or not. All right, ace queen, raise it up, obviously, and perfect. We get the dream scenario. We flopped a very strong hand against a very weak player. And I feel like in this hand I got tricky on one street. I'm not sure if it was the flop or the turn, but I know I definitely got tricky, and it looks like I chose to do it on the flop. My thinking was, if this guy peeled me pre-flop with an ace, he's certainly going to bet it. But there's an ace on the board, there's an ace in my hand, there aren't too many aces left. Now if he has anything else, since he's this 32-6, this loose passive type player, he's probably going to be playing a fit or fold approach. And if he didn't fit this flop, that means he's going to be folding to my c-bet. So rather than giving him the opportunity to do that, I checked so that he could have as wide of a bluffing range as possible. And he went for it. He took the bait by betting full pot now. He may still have a real hand, but the important thing about this play is that not only am I getting paid by the value portion of his range, I'm giving myself an opportunity to get paid by the bluffing portion of his range as well. And I continue with the charade, just like, you know what, buddy, it's all yours. I got nothing. You know, I'm trying to represent pocket kings here. I'm trying to represent pocket queens here that don't want to play a huge pot and is just trying to pot control. So I check, he puts me all in. He has the ace, he has the value hand, which, you know, may have given me all the money regardless. But I like the fact that I gave him the opportunity to pay me off with the maximum portion of his range. And we see that, you know, this is why he's a 32/6, because this guy's going to be peeling an under the gun open with ace-6 suited. A reg is probably not going to be doing this, and that's why it's important to identify your fish and play accordingly. Anyway, we get our beautiful double up, courtesy of card care. Clearly not chip care. And, oh, well, I lost chips. I guess I went for the steal. Got to take those odds. And when I flopped the nut shot, I let out trying to control the action and unfortunately did not improve. Decided to get out of the way. In this tournament, my strategy is basically try to get tricky against the fish and try to outflip or outrange the regs. Just try to beat the regs by playing slightly stronger ranges than them in the various situations. And other than that, play pretty straightforward in the early stages. And then when we get to the later stages, that's when we incorporate our ICM strategy and such. I mean, on this flop, we got the 2 overcards and the gutter. I think it's a board that they connect with a lot. Looking back now, I think I like a small c-bet because although these guys may have connected with this board, they're both really passive, so they're more likely to call than they are to raise. And also, I'm checking here, I definitely want to see a turn if the price is right, but we saw that card care just bets the pot, and SKL probably bets big as well, so I'm going to be priced out just as often if I try to go for a check call as I would be if I bet in the rare instances I get raised. So looking back, I think I like a small c-bet here, although I don't think it's going to work and be successful very often. I still do have 10 outs to probably make the best hand. And the line I took, I'm basically just surrendering the pot. And yeah, might have been able to win that one. Interesting to see that SKL doesn't squeeze with the ace-king. That's what you're typically going to find with these loose passives. They just want to see flops for as cheaply as possible, and they just want to see as many flops as possible. They aren't really interested in making plays. They're pretty much only going to 3-bet you if they have like aces. Some of them won't even 3-bet if they have kings. So here with the ace-queen, I go for the ISO. My hope was to, you know, just play this pot heads up. It may sound a little wild, but if you know for certain that this guy is going to be peeling your pre-flop raise, just completing here can be an option with even stronger parts of your range due to the fact that this guy's going to be playing a lot of hands. He is going to catch some pieces and he is going to peel pretty liberally. And if you aren't comfortable firing multiple barrels out of position to move your opponent off that wide range, you might want to keep the pot small. You want to keep that multiplier small so that your c-bets and your post-flop bets aren't as big of an investment relative to your stack, while they will remain the same relative to the pot. So we see it 3-way, c-bet with our 2 overcards and get peeled by our loose friend, and just giving up. On to the next one. I remember my stack is a little bit swingy in the early stages of this tournament, but I mean, it's mainly because of this hand here. So I saw that Pori was playing fairly loose, running a 22-17 and opening from late-ish position. I had a hand that I wanted to see a flop with, but I didn't feel was strong enough to flat, so I went for the 3-bet. I got 4-bet, and I was like, well, what odds am I getting? It's about 800 more to win 3,400, which means I'm getting like 4-1 on my money, and I just felt that was too good of a price to fold. So I peeled here with the intention of continuing anytime I flopped, you know, a pair or better, and getting out of the way anytime I bricked completely. This was one of those times, and I just fold to his c-bet. There with those 6s, would have loved to see a flop, but can't be continuing versus dem raises and dem re-raises. And we limp in here. Our intention, once we flop a pair, is to take this thing to showdown for as cheaply as possible. Go for a little value on the river. No dice. Had we missed that flop, probably just lead out with a small bet to try to take it down. Remember, when you have no equity in the pot, because you haven't made any hand, you don't have a good chance of winning the pot, that's when you want to press your fold equity. You want to use your bets, you want to use your chips to be able to win the pots. When, however, you have a decent amount of pot equity, you have a decent chance of winning the pot, you no longer need to use your fold equity to try to take things down. you can let your opponents take the lead with the betting because you can win the pot by just having the best hand. So here with the ace 10 suited, this hand is super good, especially versus a cutoff range. So the play is, well, put some more money in the pot. We have two options. We can flat call or we can 3-bet. If we 3-bet, I think we have to play for all our chips. We can't really 3-bet fold when we start the hand with 20 big blinds. And I think that I can extract a good amount of value from a dominated range if I just flat here. I opt to go for the shove because the chip up is about 20%. And we get the call from a worse hand. Big spot for us. And we're back up to that 10K. Knowing your opponent here is pretty crucial. If they're going to call you light, you might want to whack it in and just take the flip. If there's someone who likes to play really aggressively after the flop and barrel, 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 then flatting with a strong range is a pretty attractive option because you can expect to extract a lot of value after the flop. I didn't have any reads on this table, and I think I just saw 20% chip up. Awesome hand for reshoving with. I want to make sure I see all 5 cards with this hand rather than getting blown off, which is what maybe would have happened. I probably would have taken one off on the flop and felt compelled to continue on the turn, but who knows? I'm going to see it with this ace 6. Oh, come on, Grips, you're so nitty and you would have flopped the joint. I think I probably should have taken that price multi-way, but no one said I played a perfect tournament, but someone did say I'm going to win this thing. So we get 3-bet by Kungen, who is a very aggressive 3-better. And against that, I think I like to slow play. I hope I went for the flat here. No. 4-bet, 5-bet, okay, I call. I guess the sample is pretty small, and that's something you'll learn with the heads-up display is that the statistics will help you, but the fewer hands that statistics sample is spread over, the less reliable it's going to be. Looking at this, his size is actually pretty big, which makes it look like maybe he's trying to get it in. So small click 4-bet, he shoves. What's going to have, like jacks? Yeah, exactly, jacks. And we make full house on the turn. Send the rack to this guy right here, 21K in chips. And this is the point at which the tournament starts to get a little bit funner. But that's also going to be the part where we wrap up part 1. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're excited for what's to come in the rest of the series. I'm really excited to review my play and see where I made some cool plays and where I made some just brutal mistakes. I'm excited to show you guys that, you know what? Coach isn't perfect, so you don't need to hold yourself to some crazy standard of perfection too. It's okay to make mistakes. The key is to look back and learn from the mistakes so that you will be less likely to make them in the future. The best way to become great at something very quickly is to ensure that you never make the same mistake twice. But it's okay to make those mistakes the first time. If you're interested in getting Hold'em Manager, I'll put a link in the video description. And until next time, this has been Evan for Grips.com saying, take what you learned, go out there, and get stacking.
Yeah, we get it stacking. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. The flops I be smashing, the pots I be blasting. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. When the main event, man, that could never happen. The Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. Now you're picking up traction, getting action. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking.
Stack it up, cash it in, damn, I win again. Many friends come to play, cause I'm on the internet. Better yet, I flop the turn and take a chance upon the river. I'll bluff you with the 7-2 offsuit, whatever's clever, call you all in while your chip stacks falling. Better believe the dealer, cause the game just started. Don't know the rules, you bet it all and then you risk it. If you wanna learn it, you should go online and hit up Grips it.
Yeah, we get it stacking. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. The flops I be smashing, the pots I be blasting. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. When the main event, man, that could never happen. The Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. Now you're picking up traction, getting action. Grips.com, tell you how to get it stacking. Ever since a young cash in the fast stack, crammed in the clam clip. Gotta get the action, gotta get it stacking. Dollars on the noggin, want a lot of transactions. Started as a little retarded, now with the knowledge, playing cards, flopping, bombarded, cause it was harder than I thought. Then I got on Gribs.com, asking and got what I needed to be to me get it stacking. Yeah, we get it stacking. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. The flops I be smashing, the pots I be blasting. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. When the main event, man, that could never happen. The Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. Now you're picking up traction, getting action. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. Yeah, we get it stacking. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. The flops I be smashing, the pots I be blasting. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. When the main event, man, that could never happen. The Gribs.com taught you how to get stacking. Now you're picking up traction, getting action. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. Yeah, we get it stacking. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. The flops I be smashing, the pots I be blasting. Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. When the main event, man, that could never happen. The Gribs.com taught you how to get it stacking. Now you pick